the most powerful form of intelligence. Jung on intuition's superiority over logic. Okay, I need to ask you something crazy. Have you ever just known something was wrong? I mean, absolutely certain, but couldn't explain why? Like that job offer that looked perfect on paper, but something in your gut screamed, "Don't take it." And later, boom, turns out your gut was 100% right. Look, I'm not gonna lie. What I'm about to share might completely change how you make decisions for the rest of your life. Imagine this. You're faced with a complex decision. You gather all the facts, analyze the data, create pros and cons lists, and yet something deep inside tells you to go in the completely opposite direction. Most people would dismiss this feeling, trusting their rational mind instead. But what if that mysterious inner voice, your intuition, is actually the most evolved, sophisticated form of intelligence you possess? Carl Jung, one of history's most revolutionary psychologists, believed exactly this. While society has conditioned us to worship logic and dismiss intuition as mere gut feeling, Jung discovered something far more profound. Intuition might be the highest form of intelligence humans possess. This isn't some new age fantasy. It's backed by serious research that most people never hear about. And today, I'm going to show you why your intuitive mind might be the most powerful yet underutilized tool you have. Here's the thing that blew my mind when I first learned about this. Jung discovered that our minds have 4 primary ways of understanding the world. Thinking, which is your logical, analytical brain, the one that weighs pros and cons. Feeling, your emotional intelligence, how you judge what matters and what doesn't. Sensation, your 5 senses, experiencing the concrete physical world. And intuition, your ability to perceive patterns and possibilities before they're obvious. Now, from kindergarten all the way through college, which one did they drill into you? Thinking, right? Logic, analysis, the rational mind. But Jung found something fascinating. None of these functions is automatically better than the others. They all serve different purposes, and the smartest people can use all 4. Yet what's really wild is that intuition often operates at a level of complexity that logical thinking simply can't touch. I mean, think about it for a second. Jung said, intuition is perception via the unconscious. But what does that actually mean? While your conscious, logical mind can only process about 40 bits of information per second, that's not a typo, just 40. Your unconscious mind, where intuition operates, processes an estimated 11 million bits per second. This isn't some mystical mumbo-jumbo. It's straight-up processing power. Your intuitive mind has access to vastly more information than your conscious mind could ever handle. Have you ever had that experience where you meet someone new and something just feels off, even though they're saying all the right things? Then months later, you discover they were lying to everyone. That wasn't random emotion. That was your intuitive mind picking up dozens of subtle clues your conscious mind completely missed. Micro-expressions, inconsistencies in their story, tiny shifts in body language. Your intuition captured all of it in an instant. This is why Jung believed intuition represents a higher order of intelligence. It doesn't replace logical thinking. It transcends its limitations. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. The problem with pure logical thinking is that it's fundamentally limited by the information you know you have. You can only reason with the data that's explicitly available to your conscious mind. But as Jung discovered, most of life's truly important questions involve factors that can't be fully known. Is this the right person to spend my life with? Should I take this job across the country? Can I trust this business partner? Which career path will actually make me happy? Pure logic completely falls apart with these questions because you never have all the relevant information. You don't know what you don't know. There are always blind spots. Some of the most important factors can't be measured or quantified, and the future is inherently uncertain. This is why purely logical people often get stuck in what psychologists call analysis paralysis. They can't make a decision because logic alone can't provide the answer. Jung saw that this is exactly where intuition shows its power. Your intuition can integrate vastly more variables, including knowledge you didn't even realize you had. Wait till you hear this next part. Jung noticed that some people are naturally more intuitive than others. These people, intuitive types, often show some pretty remarkable abilities. They spot patterns before they fully emerge. They sense possibilities that others completely miss. They connect dots between seemingly unrelated ideas. They anticipate changes before they happen. And they read people and situations with freaky accuracy. I remember this one time I was about to hire someone for my team. Their resume was perfect. The interviews went great, references checked out, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Against all logical evidence, I trusted that feeling and passed. 6 months later, I found out they'd been fired from their next job for toxic behavior that destroyed team morale. This isn't supernatural. It's just a highly developed intuitive function. And here's what's fascinating. Many of history's greatest innovators, scientists, and artists were primarily intuitive types. Einstein, arguably the greatest scientific mind ever, famously said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. He wasn't just being poetic. Einstein genuinely attributed his biggest scientific breakthroughs not to logical step-by-step thinking, but to intuitive leaps. His theory of relativity came to him as a visual intuition first. The mathematical proof followed later. Jung discovered that groundbreaking insights rarely come from logical thinking alone. They emerge from intuitive perception, seeing patterns and possibilities that logic by itself could never reveal. Here's where it gets personal. Jung had this concept called the shadow, the repressed, denied aspects of ourselves that we push underground into the unconscious. And for many of us, modern humans, intuition itself has become a shadow function. Think about it. From early childhood, we're programmed to distrust our intuition. Don't judge a book by its cover. Show your work. Prove it logically. Where's your evidence? These messages, while sometimes helpful, can lead us to systematically dismiss our intuitive insights. We learn to override our gut feelings with rational explanations, even when those explanations feel empty or forced. Jung saw the psychological fallout of this oppression: anxiety, inner conflict, and often terrible decision-making. When we ignore our intuition, we cut ourselves off from a critical source of intelligence. And you know what's really scary? The most dangerous people, according to Jung, are those who have completely disconnected from their intuition. People who operate entirely from cold logic without access to the deeper wisdom of the unconscious mind. Their decisions might look rational on paper, but often lead to disaster because they're missing the fuller picture that intuition provides. Think about the executives who created the 2008 financial crisis. Brilliant logical minds, economists, mathematicians, analysts. Their models were logically flawless based on the variables they included. But they were missing the intuitive warning signs that something fundamental was wrong. So this is where it gets really practical. If intuition is indeed such a powerful form of intelligence, how do we develop it? Jung suggested several approaches that I've personally found incredibly effective. Pay attention to your dreams. This sounds woo-woo, but it's not. Dreams often contain intuitive insights that bypass your conscious reasoning. Keeping a dream journal by your bed can help you access this intuitive wisdom. Notice your body's signals. Your intuition often speaks through physical feelings, tension in your stomach, lightness in your chest, a nagging headache. These aren't random. They're intuitive signals. Create quiet space regularly. Intuition thrives in moments without distraction. Even just 10 minutes of walking without your phone, sitting in silence, or meditating can create the conditions for intuitive insights. Test your hunches in low-risk situations. Instead of dismissing intuitive hits, test them in situations where there's not much at stake. This builds your confidence in your intuitive abilities. Ask yourself, what do I know without knowing how I know it? This question can bypass your logical mind and access your intuitive knowledge directly. This isn't mysterious or magical. It's a natural process of integrating conscious and unconscious parts of your mind. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some woo-woo crystal energy stuff. Trust me, I get it. I was skeptical too. But here's what's wild. Modern brain science is actually proving Jung was right all along. There's this crazy research they did on something called thin slicing. Basically, your brain's ability to make spot-on judgments with tiny bits of information. Like when you meet someone, and in the first 5 seconds, something tells you, this person can't be trusted. That's thin slicing in action. And guess what? When they tested this in the lab, these quick intuitive judgments were often more accurate than when people spent hours analyzing all the details. Isn't that insane? Your gut can actually outperform your logical brain on complex decisions. But here's the part nobody talks about. A neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio studied people with damage to the brain, regions that process emotions. These people had perfect logical abilities. They could solve math problems and puzzles just fine. But they made absolutely terrible life decisions without the emotional signals that inform intuition. Their logical thinking led them completely astray. This confirms exactly what Jung proposed decades earlier. Logic without intuition is fundamentally impaired intelligence. So let me show you how this translates to your everyday life. How do you actually use intuition as a form of intelligence? First, recognize that intuition shows its greatest power in specific situations. Complex decisions with tons of factors. When a situation has too many moving parts for your conscious mind to track, intuition often outperforms analysis. people judgments. Sizing up someone's character, intentions, or reliability is where intuition really shines. Creative challenges. When you need totally new solutions, intuition can make connections that logic would never discover. High uncertainty situations. When facing the unknown, intuition provides guidance where logic has nothing to work with. Think about the biggest mistake you've ever made. Now ask yourself, did you have a gut feeling you ignored before making that decision? I bet the answer is yes. Here's a simple process I use that you might find helpful. Gather the relevant information, giving your unconscious mind data to work with. Step away. Literally do something else and let it percolate. Pay attention to the intuitive signals that emerge. Feelings, images, sudden insights. Verify these insights with some logical analysis and make your decision using both your intuition and your logical brain. This method uses both your systems of intelligence, the massive processing power of your intuitive mind, and the clarifying strength of logical analysis. Now, I'm not saying intuition is perfect. Jung was careful to point out that intuition, like all mental functions, has its shadow side and limitations. Sometimes what feels like intuition is actually just projection of our fears or desires. Our intuitive hits can be colored by biases we don't recognize. Sometimes we see meaningful patterns where there's just coincidence, and intuition often gives direction, but not the specific steps to get there. The key is developing the ability to tell the difference between true intuition and these distortions. That's exactly why combining intuition with some critical thinking is so important. Not to override your intuition, but to help refine and verify it. The smartest way to use intuition involves both trusting it and questioning it, letting it guide you while maintaining enough awareness to catch when it might be off track. If you want to experience this for yourself, I mean really feel the power of intuitive intelligence, I've got a simple 30-day challenge for you. For the first 10 days, just write down one intuitive impression you experience daily. Don't analyze it, just note it. This builds your awareness of how intuition already works in your life. For the next 10 days, start acting on small intuitive nudges in low-risk situations. Notice what happens when you follow versus ignore these signals. And for the final 10 days, practice consciously using both intuition and logical analysis together. When facing decisions, first note your gut response, then analyze logically, then decide based on both. Most people who do this consistently see mind-blowing results, discovering that their intuition contained wisdom their logical mind couldn't access. You know what's fascinating about intuition? It appears to work across distances and time in ways that logic simply can't explain. I remember hearing about this mother who suddenly woke up at 2 a.m. with an overwhelming feeling that something was wrong with her son, who was away at college. She called him immediately, despite the late hour, and found out he'd just been in a serious accident. This kind of thing happens way more often than we acknowledge. Jung actually had a term for this. He called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that can't be explained by cause and effect. These experiences suggest that intuition might be tapping into something beyond our individual consciousness. Jung proposed that we all access a collective unconscious, a shared repository of human experience that transcends individual boundaries. This idea might sound mystical, but think about how we evolved as social creatures. Our brains developed sophisticated mechanisms for absorbing and processing social information beyond conscious awareness. What Jung called the collective unconscious might simply be our shared evolutionary programming, the accumulated wisdom of human experience encoded in our neural architecture. This might explain why sometimes your intuitive insights contain wisdom that goes beyond your personal experience. Your intuition may be drawing on patterns recognized by humans across generations. It's like having access to an ancient wisdom database that your logical mind can't directly access. This isn't supernatural. It's just tapping into the full spectrum of human cognition. Another thing about intuition that blows my mind is how it seems to operate differently across cultures. In many Eastern traditions, intuitive knowing has been valued for thousands of years, while Western thought has privileged rational thinking since the Enlightenment. Japanese concepts like amai, intuitive connection, or Chinese wu-wei, effortless action, describe forms of non-logical knowing that have been systematically developed in these cultures. Jung was fascinated by these cultural differences and saw them as evidence that Western civilization had become dangerously imbalanced. Overvaluing logical thinking and undervaluing intuition, he believed this imbalance was responsible for many of the crises of the modern world, where technical advancement outpaces wisdom. Just look at climate change, artificial intelligence, or social media algorithms. All products of brilliant logical thinking that nonetheless create problems that pure logic seems unable to solve. As we face increasingly complex global challenges, Jung's insights about intuition become even more relevant. The solutions to our biggest problems won't come from more data or more analysis alone. They'll emerge from a deeper, more integrated form of intelligence that includes both rational thinking and intuitive wisdom. This brings me to something really important about developing intuition. It requires courage, real courage, because following your intuition often means going against conventional wisdom, taking risks that seem illogical on paper, or making choices others won't understand. I've seen this repeatedly in successful entrepreneurs and innovators. They make decisions that seem crazy to everyone else, but they're following a deep intuitive knowing that proves right in the end. Steve Jobs was famous for this. He once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." This intuitive approach guided him to make decisions that transformed entire industries, even when the logical evidence suggested he was wrong. But here's the catch. Developing this kind of intuitive courage isn't easy. It means being willing to stand alone sometimes. It means tolerating uncertainty. It means being okay with not being able to fully explain your decisions to others, and it means accepting that sometimes your intuition will be wrong. But recognizing that even these failures are part of developing your intuitive intelligence. I've found that the people who are best at using intuition aren't necessarily those with special psychic abilities. They're the ones who've developed a deep relationship with themselves, who've done the inner work to clear the static that interferes with intuitive signals. Things like unresolved emotional issues, rigid belief systems, or constant distraction can all block intuitive knowing. That's why Jung believed genuine self-awareness is the foundation for developing powerful intuition. The more honestly you can see yourself, including your shadows, biases, and blind spots, the clearer your intuitive channel becomes. It's like cleaning a foggy window. Suddenly, you can see what was always there. So here's the bottom line. If Jung was right, if intuition truly represents a more evolved form of intelligence than pure logic, then most of us have been operating with a seriously limited definition of what it means to be smart. We've been taught to trust only what we can prove, to value only what we can measure, and to believe only what we can logically verify. And yet, our most important decisions, our deepest insights, and our most meaningful breakthroughs often come through intuitive channels. Maybe it's time to reclaim the full spectrum of your intelligence, to develop not just your capacity for logical analysis, but also your intuitive wisdom. As Jung himself put it, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves. Your intuition isn't some primitive leftover from your caveman days. It's actually the most sophisticated information processing system you have. Learning to access it, trust it, and integrate it with your logical thinking might be the smartest decision you ever make. If you found this eye-opening, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the depths of human psychology. Every day, we dive into topics that challenge what you think you know and offer new perspectives on what it means to be human. Until next time, trust your deeper knowing. It might be a whole lot smarter than you think.